Welcome. We will discuss about the security concepts in RHEL 7, which is really different from or something different from the earlier versions of Red Hat 5 or 6 versions. Red Hat 7 come up with the concept that override the run levels that are exist in the previous versions, and the sysv init was replaced by systemd in our latest version of RHEL 7. And also we are going to discuss more detail about each and every individual concept when it come into our discussion on its way. And before we do that, we can discuss like IP tables can be still useful, but those are deprecated. So what I always advise you to practice the industry best standards or practices. That means how we supposed to work. We try to use that, though we have different options to have an effective working environment. And you can use the IP tables, but it's not encouraged to use firewalls. We strongly advise to enable or disable the firewalls. In RHEL 7, it is recommended to use system CTL firewall commands to have and restrict the access. To use the net filter, we have two options. We have IP tables and firewall D. And if you're working with the IP tables, you require to use two separate tables, one for IPv4 tables and other one is for IPv6 tables. If you are using the firewall, which is the latest version and which is the industry best practice of recommendation, that you require to use only one firewall, whether it's for IPv4 or IPv6 addressing. The default and base installation for RHEL 7 is Firewall D. That means the Firewall D will be downloaded and configured by default when you download RHEL 7. The good thing about Firewall is you can use on a command line, or you can also use using GUI interface. That's a good thing. Like some people are habituated for GUI, so still you have an option to use the GUI for the Firewall D. And the always good and industry best practice is to work on the command line. And also another one is that default services are represented by their name rather than the ports. That's another good thing. Well, it's sometimes it's not easy to remember the port numbers for the old services such as SSH or HTTP or HTTPS or any other services, or if you are using some new service for MariaDB or any mail server or postfix server, you have to remember port. And to overcome this problem, Firewall D is the best option because it will represent the service name by name itself rather than the port number. To install GUI for the firewall, you can simply type a command minstall firewall D. Firewall config. These are the commands you're gonna use to install the Firewall D service with the firewall configuration service. Firewall is installed by default on RHEL as I mentioned earlier, but on a minimum installation, you have to do that manually because the minimum installation does not come up with the required or basic packages that are supposed to be installed. In that case, you can have these required packages installed by yourself. And always is make sure whether the firewall has been in a running state or is in a stop state. To check that, systemctl check the status of firewall and make sure that's a daemon service. So you should include D at the end, otherwise you will get an error. And to change the firewall commands, keep that in mind. There is a runtime change and a permanent change. The runtime change is applicable for the current session, and it will not persist on reboot or restart of the system. And use the runtime change, you don't require to reload the firewall command. And to make the changes permanent, you have to make them permanent by adding the switch capital P, or make it like dash dash hyphen permanent to make the changes permanent. And you have to make sure to reload the firewall then only the changes will be taking place. The firewall works in a way that it group rules inside the zones. That's the advantage of firewall D. You may have a work environment, you have a corporate environment, you have a home environment, in which each environment may have different set of rules regarding the ports, especially when you're working on a public network. You try to restrict the access for the port 80, which is the HTTP, and while you're working on a corporate environment, you want to grant the access for that port. In that case, firewall D have good provision to give you more options to specify on what zone you would like to include the options in terms of firewall command. And following that, the rules can be source IP address or port, or what are the default services open by default for particular zone. And usually, like, each zone will be configured with certain rules. That's the advantage with zone concepts for the firewall. To list the zones in a firewall, simply type the command firewall cmd -get zones. It will display all the zones that are available in our current environment, and also provide you the attributes in terms of what are the default services are open or accessible in that particular zone, and what are the source destination source configurations that we can allocate for the particular zone.